Okay, welcome back, everyone. Nice to see everyone back. I'm going to start with this next topic of the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've learned that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this isn't actually the teachings of the Buddha. He doesn't teach that way. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. I'm going to share with you the original words of the Buddha on this important teaching, and then we're going to relate it to day-to-day things that you make decisions about today, where you can understand these teachings that he's sharing with you. Because in terms of reducing your pollution of mind, those 3 poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance, learning the 5 precepts is actually going to help you to be able to do that, where you can now make decisions through these 5 precepts. You'll see that it'll help to eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance. And as you're learning something like the 5 precepts, you can keep in mind that it's going to significantly reduce your unwholesome kamma, because you're having less and less craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. You're making less and less decisions through that. And also, when you're learning something like the 5 precepts, it's helpful to understand that what the Buddha is teaching you is the natural law of Kamma. He's teaching you this cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. So when you hear me teaching and you see the words of the Buddha, it's not rules or commandments. He's not trying to convince you to do anything. I'm not trying to convince you to do anything. All that the 5 precepts are doing for you is they're helping you to be able to see this natural law very clearly, that when you make certain decisions in a certain way, it's going to produce certain results, either wholesome or unwholesome. So this is the way to significantly reduce your unwholesome kamma and improve and increase your wholesome kamma. So this natural law of kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's a sequence of decisions, the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and your results. It's nothing mystical or magical or anything like that. It's not about punishments and rewards. So as I go through each one of these, just like always, we're going to pause for questions. So if you guys have questions, you can use the mics here. And those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see that. So this first one is abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, it's important not to believe any of his teachings, and that you're going to need to investigate and examine what it is that he's teaching you. Don't just take it at face value. You're going to need to be able to see the truth and the wisdom in his teachings. So when you see something like this, where he's talking about abandoning the taking of life and ultimately having this compassion for the welfare of all living beings, don't just assume that you know what a living being is. If you don't know what a living being is, you're going to need to investigate this. And the Buddha gives you a teaching to help you understand what is a living being. Because anytime you cause harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So you need to know what a living being is so that you can live compassionately for all living beings. He has a teaching called the 5 aggregates. One of the ways you might think of this is the 5 criteria, or the 5 elements, or the 5 collections. These are the 5 criteria of what make a living being a living being. So I'll introduce you to it. The 5 aggregates are form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. Now, you know that you're a living being. So as I describe these to you, you can independently verify that this is true, because this is a definition that's held up for 2,500 years. The Buddha describes every living being is going to have these 5 things. The first one is they're going to have physical form. You know you have physical form, right? You know that. Okay. The next one is feelings. A living being is going to have feelings, pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. Okay, so you know you have feelings. Then there's perceptions. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world. You look out at the world in a certain way, and you have certain views and opinions about how the world functions. That's your perceptions. Then there's volitional formations. These are choices and decisions. There's certain choices and decisions that you make. You have free will. That's what volitional formations are, that you can make your own choices and decisions about what you experience in life. Then the 5th one is called consciousness. A consciousness is the mind. So you know that you have that. You have a mind. So form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and a consciousness. And all living beings have all 5 of these. And you know that you have all 5 of these. So you can see that for a squirrel, a deer, a a fly, a bee, a snake, a spider, they have all 5 aggregates, right? You can independently verify this. But then to take this further so that you don't believe anything, but you cultivate the wisdom, you need to investigate it on the other side too. Is take something that you know is not a living being, like this chair that I'm sitting in. Ask yourself, does it have physical form? Joe's shaking his head, yes. It's physical form, right? Yeah. Does it have feelings? Doesn't have feelings, right? It doesn't get sad or frustrated. Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? Is it like, man, this guy who's sitting on me is very heavy. I wish he wouldn't sit on me, right? He's not, the chair's not thinking that way, right? It doesn't have perceptions, right? What about choices and decisions, volitional formations? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street and put itself back down? Can't do that, right? Does it have a consciousness or a mind? Doesn't have one of those, right? So you can see that this definition holds up, that the 5 aggregates describe what is a living being. And this is important for you because in order to apply this precept, you're going to need to know what is a living being. Now, you can investigate the 5 aggregates more closely if you'd like, but in the meantime, as you're trying to understand what is a living being, you might use this definition here, is that a living being is going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. This isn't true in all situations. That's why the Buddha didn't teach this as the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates is what you would like to learn. But in about 99.9% of the situations, this is true. But this isn't going to get you to enlightenment. But you can use this for a while until you fully understand and you're understanding the 5 aggregates, right? So a living being is going to typically come from an egg and a sperm. It's going to always have a consciousness though, right? So this is going to help you to be able to understand what is a living being. And from this, you can understand that a plant or bacteria or a virus or something like this is not a living being. Now, one of the challenges in the unenlightened state is that we tend to use language and words that doesn't really reflect true reality. Because of that lack of wisdom that we have in the unenlightened state, we tend to say things that aren't actually true. So we might say, don't kill that plant, or I'm going to kill that plant, or I'm going to kill this tree, or don't kill that tree, right? Or I'm going to take this medicine and kill this bacteria in the body. You're not actually killing it, because it's not a living being. It doesn't have all 5 aggregates. What we're actually doing is we're harvesting this plant, right? We're harvesting the broccoli. We're harvesting the cauliflower. We're harvesting the apples. We're not actually killing the bacteria or the virus. We're eliminating it from the body. And you can see that these things aren't living beings through the 5 aggregates, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect. Because whenever you cause harm to a living being, harm is going to come back to you. So when we take medicine to eliminate a bacteria from the body, we actually experience wholesome results, right? This body becomes more healthy, right? If that was a living being and we were killing it, we would actually experience unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. So even though we use language like killing a tree or killing a bacteria, killing a virus, and that's what people tend to use when they have a lack of wisdom, by the time you understand what is a living being, you will find it very difficult to speak that way because you'll understand that those things aren't living beings. So you'll need to be able to see that the way that oftentimes we speak with a lack of wisdom is different than the way you'll speak as you start to cultivate more and more wisdom. So you need to be able to see what is a living being in order to then understand and practice this precept. So all of these things here are intentional killings: a euthanasia of a human, an animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, any government-sponsored killing, and murders. These are all intentional killings, but whether you choose to do these things or not, it's a choice for you to make. It's not up to me to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. And there's actually examples of these where they could actually be beneficial and helpful, and you could actually be practicing this particular precept, but there's also situations where it would be unwise to do these things. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of these to help you understand this so that you can more fully understand this precept of how to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because that's what the Buddha is teaching you to do. He's not saying preserve all life at all cost. That's sometimes what people hear when they see this precept. They think it means preserve all life at all costs. That's not what he's teaching you. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because when you choose to actively kill, you're using craving, anger, and ignorance, right? If you went out into the world and were trying to actively kill other beings, then there's going to be harm that comes to you. People are going to try to kill you too, right? Or they're going to try to harm you because you're trying to harm other beings. But you need to be able to understand it doesn't say to preserve all life at all costs. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So let me give you some examples of this where you can see some of these things you might actually decide to do one way or the other. And again, it's your choice. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but I'm just going to help you see this natural law of Kamma. So let's take this one of termination of a pregnancy. Now, some people think of this as a political discussion, right? I don't think of it that way because it has nothing to do with politics. It's a medical technology that we have available to us. And in some cases, it can be helpful. In other cases, it maybe is not so helpful. But at the end of the day, it's up to each individual to make their own choice. It's not up to anybody else to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. So if I was a female, which obviously I'm not, if I had a womb in the body and there was a fetus there that was growing and a medical professional says, hey, look, based on the technology that we have, that fetus is never going to have a viable life outside of the womb. You're actually maybe risking your own life to continue to carry this fetus inside the womb. We recommend that you terminate the pregnancy. Well, in this situation, you could potentially be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings if you choose to terminate that pregnancy. Because one of the first beings you need to have compassion for is yourself. If you don't have compassion for yourself, how can you have it for others? By the way, what compassion means is the concern for the misfortune of others. That's what it is. The concern for the misfortune of others, right? So you need to have compassion for this being who you are. So perhaps in this example, someone might choose to actually terminate the pregnancy. And this is typically like once a lifetime, twice in a lifetime kind of thing. It's kind of rare that these kinds of things would happen. But this is a situation that you could potentially terminate the pregnancy and actually be producing wholesome Kamma because you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But then let's just say that I was having sex regularly with lots of different people. I was regularly becoming pregnant, maybe 8, 10 different times. I'm terminating pregnancies. Now, this is going to cause unwholesome Kamma for me. I'm going to notice that with all these medical procedures, this body is going to start to become unhealthy. That there's each time they do this medical procedure, it's going to wear on this body. And then now I'm going to experience certain sickness and illness because of this. You can see that the human body will deteriorate from having done this particular medical procedure multiple times. But whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make, right? I'm not here to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't do. In fact, if somebody came to me and said, David, should I terminate a pregnancy? I wouldn't say yes or no. I would say, well, if you terminate it, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you'll experience. And the decision is up to them to be able to make, right? I'm not here to tell people what to do. But you can see with something like termination of a pregnancy, it can be done in a way that produces wholesome Kamma, but it could also be unwholesome Kamma. So there's a gray area here that you need to be able to see more clearly. Let's take some other examples. Let's just actually take an example from my life, something that actually happened. One time we had termites that came and started infesting our house, and we started noticing signs of termites. Well, the first thing that we decided to do is we decided to start to research to see if there's a way to get rid of these termites without killing them, because we kind of knew that that was like the general way to get rid of termites. But we were like, hey, maybe, there's a way to eliminate them without doing that. So we started researching on the internet to see if there was a possible way to do that. That's living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. We're interested in getting these beings out of here because obviously they're damaging our home. And if we allowed them to continue to damage our home, that's not living compassionately for me, my wife, my son. We're not going to have a home to live in, right? So we started researching this of how to get rid of these termites without killing them. But what we found out is that right now, there isn't a way to do that. So my wife called somebody to come and they put some food around for them to eat, and they ended up dying over the course of multiple years. They took it back to the nest and all that kind of stuff. So we were living compassionately in that example. We weren't killing these beings out of anger, hatred, or craving, or ignorance, or anything like that. But these beings were causing harm, and now harm was coming to them. This is the natural law of Kamma. And that's the challenge of being in the animal realm, is they don't have a level of consciousness to understand that we eat wood, and if we eat this house, it's going to cause harm to these people, and I'm not interested in doing that. If we had the ability to eat wood, and that's what we were interested in doing, we would go out to the forest, and we know that we're not harming anybody by eating the wood in the forest. But these animals, unfortunately, don't have that level of consciousness to understand. So they were causing harm, and now harm came to them, right? So that's an example for you. Another example might be like war, right? If a government said, hey, you can go over there and kill those people in that country, and we're not going to arrest you for murder. We're completely fine with you going over there and killing those people. But if you come back to our country and you kill people here, we're going to arrest you for murder, right? This is a human law, right? We're talking about the natural law of Kamma. Now, human laws are imperfect because they're created and administered and enforced by human beings. So a human government could say, go over there and kill those people, and we're not going to do anything about that. We're not going to prosecute you for murder. But you can't escape the natural law of Kamma. You're still going to experience the results of the natural law of Kamma. That's why when you go off to war, you're very likely to be killed yourself. Or you could get amputations, or you could get brain injuries, or you could get addicted to drugs and alcohol. Or some people, when they come back from war, they commit suicide. Some people have difficulties integrating back into society, where they don't have the ability to easily get a house to live in, or food to be able to eat, or a job. It's very difficult for them to do those kinds of things. This is the natural law of Kamma. It's not punishments and rewards. It's the results of our decisions. So each one of these you're going to need to look at as you're experiencing different things in life and decide how to practice this precept, because it's not always black and white. The Buddha doesn't teach that way. And if you need help, you're always welcome to reach out to a teacher, and someone can help you and guide you to be able to understand this. Sometimes students ask me questions about these kinds of things here. So we'll talk about these as part of our discussion. I don't know if your country has this. Some countries have this. It's called a do not resuscitate, or a DNR. It's a legal document that you can put in place while you're alive that tells your relatives that if this being dies, don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. If you've done one of these, sometimes people ask me, am I still living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? The answer is yes, because you haven't killed anybody. What you're saying is, I'm comfortable with death. If this being dies, don't use medical technology to bring me back, right? So that's what a DNR is. And if you have one of those, you're still practicing this precept. And then sometimes people ask me about defense and protection. Like if you're maybe asleep in your room at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning in your house, and somebody breaks in through your window, what should you do? Right? Well, the first thing I share with people is if someone breaking in at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning through your window, they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers, right? They're there to do harm, right? So you can know that right off the beginning. So what I suggest people to do is, if possible, get out of the house, right? Just get out, take your phone with you, or maybe leave it behind if you have to. Go to a neighbor's house, call police. They're the ones who have the training and the equipment to be able to take care of that situation. If they like to steal something, if they like to break something, so be it. But protect your life. That's living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But this isn't black and white. The Buddha's not teaching you like a decision tree, that if this happens, do this. And if this happens, do that. Because that would be a permanent answer for every single situation. But every situation has different variables. If somebody's breaking into your house, you might look outside your window and there's a gang of 20 people out there, right? And it's not wise to go outside in that situation. Or maybe the whole neighborhood is on fire, right? You don't know, right? So you might not be able to leave. But that would be my first option, and that would be my first suggestion. But perhaps you're backed up into the corner, and now this person's got a knife or a gun, and they're trying to harm this being who you are. If you stand there and you just let them stab you with a knife or whatever it is, you're not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, right? Perhaps you might need to get a weapon yourself and cause this being harm in order to protect this being, right? And that would be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Just like the termites are causing harm and now harm comes to them, this human being who broke in and is causing harm, now there's harm that's coming to that being, but not based on your decisions, based on their decisions. They're the ones who chose to break into your house at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, right? So this harm is coming to them based on their decisions. So that would be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. I would suggest to cause the least amount of harm as possible, and that way you can just protect this being. If they have a stick, get a bigger stick, right? Something like that. And now just cause the least amount of harm as possible to stop this harm coming to you. Okay, so this would be defense and protection. Sometimes people ask me about consuming animal products or eating vegan. If somebody would like to move to that type of food supply, they surely can. That would be a practice of living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But whether you choose to do that or if you choose to do that, it's your choice to make, right? It's not up to me to decide for you. But what you'll notice is if you move to a plant-based food supply, the body and the mind is actually going to become healthier, because when you're eating animal flesh, you're actually ingesting certain drugs, hormones, and toxins that are in the animal flesh, because farmers are putting antibiotics and growth hormones and things like this into the animals. And then when you're eating the flesh, you're also eating that as well. Even if you eat like wild fish, they've taken wild fish out of like clean water streams in places like the USA, and they tested the flesh and they found like over 90 different substances that shouldn't have been there inside the meat of the flesh of the animal. They found things like cocaine and antidepressants and things like this. So when you're eating the flesh of the animal, you're actually eating these drugs and hormones and toxins as well. So if you choose to move to a plant-based food supply, you'll see improvement to the condition of your mind in the health of the body. But when or if you ever choose to do that is a choice for you to make. And if you ever do choose to do that, I suggest you do it gradually, slowly but surely, because if you just try to snap your fingers and instantly implement it, it's kind of too much for your mind and the body. You might decide to do this just gradually easing into it. And then as you do that, you might actually notice that the body needs certain supplements. Like there's a certain vitamin that the body needs. It's called B12. And this only shows up in like 1 or 2 different types of plants. And they're very rare types of plants that people don't regularly eat. So you might need to take like a B12 supplement. And even with that, you might notice that it's challenging to maintain the vitamins in the body. So you might notice, like for what I had to do is I was straight vegan for like 5 years or so, and my B12 dropped, and I was using some vitamins to try to lift it back up, and it was working for a little while, but then it just wasn't working. I was noticing all these symptoms. So I needed to start eating a little bit of eggs and a little bit of ice cream and stuff like this, which has the B12 in it. So you're going to need to be able to see for yourself what's working, because we're kind of like the first generation that's majorly moving towards plant-based food supply, and the body isn't used to living on just plants, at least now. In the past, we used to. When humans first came into the world, we were plant-based eaters. That's what scientists and researchers tell us, that we used to eat all plants. We ran out of plants in the forest, so we started scavenging. When we saw tigers and other animals, predators killing, we would actually get a big group of people together and we would run them away from their kill, and then we would eat their meat. And then that wasn't enough meat for us, so we started to do organized hunting ourselves, where we were organized and hunting and killing animals for ourselves. And then that wasn't enough meat for us, so we started doing manufactured farming. You can see this not only from the research that scientists and researchers tell us this is what's happened in the past, but you can see it from your teeth, that our teeth aren't designed to eat meat. That if you look at a cow or a horse or something like this, they have very similar teeth to us. Those beings eat exclusively plants, and our teeth are pretty much exactly the same as theirs, that they're designed to actually eat plants. Because even though 20, 30, 50,000 years ago, whenever it was, we switched to eating meat, our teeth haven't changed, because we have been always from the very beginning plant-based eaters, but we started eating meat out of necessity. So if you choose to move to a plant-based food supply, you'll see the body and the mind will be healthier. But when or if you ever choose to do that, again, is a choice for you to make. Okay. So do you guys have any questions on this first precept here? Looks like Matthew has a question. For those of you guys online, you can put your question into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Taking the example that you used about the termites, if I kill a mosquito, which can bite me and even cause me diseases, or even a spider or a snake, could be causing harm to others, or a wise decision and showing compassion for my own life.
What I would suggest you do with mosquitoes and spiders and things like this is, like, if a mosquito is around you, you can blow it off or you can swipe it off, because it's not causing you any harm. It's just flying around, right? Same thing like a spider. You can kind of, if you like, pick it up with like a tissue or something and relocate it outside. Or some people use like a broom and a dustpan to relocate them to another location. Because if every single time you see a being that could cause you harm, if you killed it, this is coming from your craving, anger, and ignorance. Because you could see somebody walking down the street and you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's going to kill me. Let me kill him first, right? This wouldn't produce beneficial results for you. So I would suggest you just kind of relocate these beings and kind of blow them off or brush them off. That's out of compassion for them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, there's a question on YouTube, but I'm not going to answer it just because it's not really worded in such a way that's truly looking for an answer. It looks like it's looking for an argument, so I'm not going to answer that question. All right, so I don't see any questions anywhere else. So I'm going to move to the second question, or the second precept, which the Buddha here shares: abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. Okay, so here, of course, he's teaching us not to steal, because when we take something from somebody, there's a craving, there's ill will towards that being, and it's coming from our ignorance, and it's going to produce unwholesome results because we're now causing harm to this being. You can't cause another being to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. Causing a being harm would be to cause harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. And whenever you cause harm to a living being, harm is going to come back to you. So stealing from someone is to cause that person harm. Like if I stole someone's car, now they can't take their kids to school. They can't go to work. They can't go to the store and buy basic necessities to sustain their life. I've caused that person harm. And they saved a certain amount of money to be able to afford that car. And now I've caused that person harm. And harm's going to come to me from that. So that's why the Buddha teaches you, if you're interested in getting to this peace and joy of the enlightened mental state where your mind's completely peaceful, you're going to need to eliminate harm that you're causing others. Because how could you get to peace and joy if harm just keeps coming back to you over and over and over and over again? So by you eliminating stealing, you'll eliminate any kind of harm that's coming to you from that. Then it's important to not assume that something can be used or taken, right? So let's give you an example of this. Let's just say I was like a student handing in a paper at college, and my professor was out of the classroom, and I need to staple this paper, and there's a stapler on the professor's desk. And let's just say I assume that I can use it, and I pick it up and I start stapling the paper. Well, now the professor walks in the door and is like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler. Right? And now they're angry because they're holding on and possessive about their stapler. They don't know that their anger is being caused by their own mind. They think I'm the one who's causing their anger. And now maybe they give me a failing grade on the paper, or maybe they fail me in the entire class, right? This is the results of my decisions. Whereas if you understand this precept, then you understand that it would be wise for you to just wait for the professor to come back. And when they come back, just say, hey, professor, can I use your stapler? They're either going to say yes or no. And if they say yes, great, I can staple my paper. If not, they say, no, you can't use it. Okay, no worries. Go find another one somewhere else, right? Maybe another professor has one, or maybe you can go buy one. No big deal, right? But if I assume that something can be used and I just use it, now I'm causing harm. But the teachings of the Buddha here, it's not black and white. Right? You need to be able to move to this higher consciousness where you can make wise decisions in any given situation. If I was outside in my village and I saw one of my neighbors, and my neighbor maybe was doing some yard work, and maybe they cut themselves and they're bleeding profusely out of their arm. And if they continue to bleed, they're going to die. Right? But now I see one of my other neighbors have a piece of fabric on their front porch, and I could grab that fabric and put on a tourniquet in order to save this person's life. I'm going to do that, right? I'm moving to this higher consciousness where I'm thinking through the decisions and what's the wisest thing to do here. I'm not going to go ring the doorbell and just stand there and wait for them to come downstairs. And now they come downstairs 30 seconds or a minute later. Hello, neighbor. How are you? Good morning. Good evening. One of our neighbors is bleeding over there. They're probably going to die soon if I don't put something on their arm. Do you think I could use your fabric? Right? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to grab the fabric, go put on the tourniquet, get this person in an ambulance, headed to the hospital. And then, because I know this precept, I'm going to go back to the neighbor and say, hey, by the way, ding dong, I'm so sorry. I used this fabric on your front porch. I'd like to take care of this for you. Can you tell me where you got it from? I'd like to go buy one for you and replace it. Or maybe I can just give you the money for it. If you'd like the money, I'll just give you the money for it. Is there some way that I can make amends here and take care of this? Right? Because now you'd like to clean that up, right? So this teaching that the Buddha is teaching you, it's not black and white. You need to be able to move to this higher consciousness and see that there's a general way that you're going to practice, but then there's kind of these anomalies as well. You're going to see that in these next ones too. So this one, he says, accept what is given. See here? Accept what is given. Accepting what is given is that if somebody's practicing generosity with you, that you accept what is given, right? Because this is enhancing the quality of that person's mind, like we were talking previously, that the Buddha teaches generosity to give and share because it trains your mind to let go. So if grandma is going to give you this sweater, and you look at the sweater and you're like, I'll never wear that sweater ever, right? It's wise to just accept it, right? Because it's helping to enhance the quality of grandma's mind because she's practicing generosity, right? But now that you've accepted this sweater, now you might give it to somebody else, right? If grandma gets angry that you've given her sweater away, that's grandma's mind. She's having craving, desire, attachment. She gave that sweater to you with an expectation that you would actually wear the sweater, right? She didn't practice pure generosity. You haven't caused grandma to be angry. So you could give that sweater to someone else, and maybe it goes through 3, 4, 5, 10 different hands, and eventually somebody looks at the sweater and they're like, that's the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen. I'm going to wear that every single day. Oh, man, thank goodness I've got this new sweater, right? So all these people got to practice generosity all the way through until it found the person that was interested in wearing it, right? Now remember, you're moving to a higher consciousness. If someone offers you cocaine, crystal methamphetamine, heroin, are you going to accept what is given? Probably not, right? So you need to move to this higher consciousness. It's not black or white. You need to look at the situation, figure out the variables, and decide what will be wise. So in general, you accept what is given. But in certain situations, you're not going to accept what is given, right? If somebody's offering you some kind of illegal substance, for example. Now, here the Buddha teaches awaiting what is given. What that means is that you don't put expectations on other people to give you things. So say you have a life partner and you guys are living together and they're going on a business trip. What the Buddha teaches you is don't load that person up with a bunch of expectations. Like, get me this and get me that and get me this and get me that and get me this, right? That would be unwise to be able to do that because now they're burdened with all these expectations on their business trip and they're trying to find you the things that you want. And now when they come back, if they have what you want, you're happy. And if they don't, you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed. So the Buddha teaches you to await what is given, right? If they would like to buy you something on their business trip, just let them do that. And then you just accept whatever is given. But again, there's a higher consciousness here because you might have someone come to you. This has actually happened to me. Someone came to me here and said, hey, David, I'm going back to the USA. I'll be there for 6 weeks and then I'm coming back to Thailand. Is there anything I can get for you? Would you like something? Right? And this person now was practicing generosity. Right? So you need to be able to see the variables here and navigate this. It's not always black and white. Okay, so this is the second precept. Any questions here on this one you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay. Let me see if we have any. I don't see any anywhere else either. Okay. All right. So now the third one. So here, I'll read this one and then we'll talk about it. The precept says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So the Buddha is teaching you about harmful sexual contact here. If you cause harm through your sex, this is going to produce harm. It's going to come back to you. So the Buddha is teaching you how to get to a point where you're not causing harm. Because one of the strongest cravings that some human beings have is for sex. And now, depending on how you're choosing to do that, you could be potentially causing harm with anger and hatred and ill will. And this would be coming from the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So here, where the Buddha talks about having sex with people who are protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, or relatives, this is having sex with minors, right? If we were to have sex with like an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child, this would be causing harm because this child's learning and growing and developing. Their mind's not really prepared to have sex yet. And now their parents are teaching them about different things in life. And now this sexual activity is going to lure them away from that. And it's causing harm to this individual. So the Buddha teaches that it would be unwise to do that. And in most places of the world, this is where the human laws actually match up to the natural law of Kamma. There's many places in the world that have made laws in the human laws that say it's illegal to have sex with minors, but not everywhere. There's actually some places in the world that it's legal to have sex with someone who's a minor. Right? You could actually have sex with an 8-year-old child or 10-year-old child and it wouldn't be illegal. They wouldn't arrest you. But the natural law of Kamma is still at play. If you look at those places that are doing that, their political system, their economy, their social system is not really well developed, and they're really struggling because it's a regular occurrence that children are having sex at such a young age, so their mind isn't able to develop in the same way as in a society where people are waiting until later, and now they have more wisdom and be able to function in society more wisely. So you can see the natural law of Kamma is affecting that population of people that are choosing to do those kinds of things. Here where the Buddha says, whose violation entails a penalty, this is sex without consent. This is like if you were to forcibly rape somebody. This is causing harm to that individual. Now, if we chose to do that, we could very easily get harmed ourselves, right? We can get beat up, we can get murdered, we can go to jail, we can get sexually transmitted diseases. Any number of things can happen if we tried to force somebody to have sex against their will. And we're causing harm to that person, so therefore harm is going to come to us. Then up here where the Buddha talks about abandoning unchastity, are you guys familiar what chastity is? You ever heard of this word? In ancient times, fathers used to put metal underwear on their daughters, and they had a lock and key, and it was only the father that had the key. I can't imagine wearing metal underwear around, right? That must have been very challenging for women at that time. But nonetheless, that's what they were doing. They called that a chastity belt. So chastity is like having sex with no one whatsoever, lock and key, right? Unchastity would be the opposite of that, right? Having sex with lots of different people. And if we chose to do that, that's where we get sexually transmitted diseases. That's the cause and effect, right? There's also going to be a certain lack of wealth because we're having to spend all this money. Our material possessions can get damaged and destroyed because people get jealous and now they're kind of like having difficulties and they might try to damage our material possessions. We can also get beat up, we can get murdered, we can get robbed. These are all the unwholesome results of our decisions. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you that it's unwise. And of course, there's sexually transmitted diseases as well. This is the results of our decisions. This is the natural law of Kamma at play. So that's why he teaches that abandoning unchastity. Then one thing I popped in here just so you guys know is that there's some cultures that if you chose to have a partner and move in with your family, that's kind of part of the culture, that you might meet a partner and now you go to your family, maybe you're in your 20s or something, and you say to your mom and dad, like, hey, I met this partner. Would it be okay for us to move in? We'd like to save up some money and then go buy a house. And your parents in that situation, if they say yes, they've accepted the relationship. And now in this situation, you aren't doing what it says here, which is having sex with people who are protected by their family. In this situation, the family has accepted the relationship. So in some cultures, like here in Thailand, this is actually normal, that you might actually move in with your parents for a period of time, save up your money, and then go buy a house yourself. So in that situation, you are practicing this precept. Up here where it says abandoning sex with people who are protected by their teachings, what the Buddha is talking about there is people who have decided to be celibate, right? There's some people who, based on the teachings of the Buddha, have decided to no longer have sex. This is what someone's doing as they make their way closer and closer to enlightenment. You can actually get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having sexual activity. But by the time you get to the third stage, you would have stopped having sexual activity, because in that second stage of enlightenment, you actually will experience quite a bit of peacefulness, quite a bit of joy in that second stage of enlightenment, but your mind's not going to be permanently peaceful. But what some people do, especially younger people, they will make themselves up to the second stage of enlightenment, and they will kind of hang out there for a while, having relationship with their partner, maybe even having a family and things of this nature. But then at some point in the future, they might decide that they're going to move past the sexual activity, because what you're going to see is that as long as you're having sexual activity, you'll be happy and excited about that. But when you can't have sex, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. That's why you can't experience permanent peace and permanent joy while you still have sexual craving in your mind, because there's going to be some times when you can have sex and sometimes you can't. And when you can't have sex, you're going to experience those painful feelings. So in order to get to the permanent peace and permanent joy, there are certain people who have decided to no longer have sex. And here in Thailand, they make this easy for you to know who that is, right? The ordained practitioners who wear orange robes and they shave their hair, they're no longer having sex. Here in Thailand, also people who wear all white and shave their hair, they're typically not having sex. I don't have sex anymore, but that's not why I wear white and shave my hair. I don't need to advertise to people that that's what I'm doing. But you can know for yourself that if people are wearing those kinds of clothes, then you'll know that they're not having sex. And then that way, if you are interested in having sex, you would have sex with someone who's not having the celibacy as something that they're choosing to practice, right? So that's what the Buddha is teaching you here. And the reason why he's teaching that this causes harm is that by somebody getting to enlightenment, that's the very best thing that could ever happen for that person and all the people around them. Because if that person gets to enlightenment, their mind's completely peaceful and completely joyful. And now they've cultivated the wisdom to be able to then share that with other people if other people are interested in learning that. So if we were to try to lure that person away from their celibacy, it's causing harm to that person and all the people around them. And that's why the Buddha teaches you that it's unwise to actually do that. Then in terms of having sex with people who are already in committed relationships or sex outside of relationships you're committed to, that's what he's talking about here, who have a husband, wife, or partner, or even with one who has been garlanded in a sign of engagement, right? If you were to try to lure somebody out of their relationship, this is where you can get beat up, you can get murdered, your material possessions can be damaged or destroyed, you could lose your reputation in the community, you can experience sexually transmitted diseases. These are all the harms that come to us based in the craving, anger, and ignorance that the mind is making a decision on. I apologize, down here, there's another line. It talks about sex with people who are human trafficked. If you were to have sex with people who are being human trafficked, those people are typically being forced to have sex against their will for money. And if you were to go into that environment, again, you could get beat up, murdered, robbed. You could get sexually transmitted diseases. You could get arrested for these kinds of things. This is all the unwholesome results of choosing to have sex in that situation. There's also paid sexual services for someone who's actually willingly doing this sexual service. And if you chose to do that, also in those environments, once again, you can get beat up, murdered, you can get robbed, you can get arrested, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. This is all the harm of choosing to have sex in that environment. Notice that here in this precept, the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships. He was aware of this during his lifetime because it was going on during his lifetime too. This isn't anything new, right? Ever since the beginning of history, that there's been some people who have sex with the opposite gender, but there's some people who have sex with the same gender. This is completely normal. But the Buddha understood that this doesn't actually cause harm, and that's why he didn't put it in his precept. Because two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, they actually haven't caused harm to anybody. If it's a male and a female, or a male and a male, or a female and a female, they're not causing any harm to anybody. So that's why the Buddha didn't put it in here, because it's not harmful to anybody. So it's helpful to be able to see that. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence that I taught yesterday, you'll understand that it's not possible for everyone to have sex with the opposite gender, because that would be permanence. If everybody was interested in having sex with the opposite gender, that would be permanence, and we wouldn't have the universal truth of impermanence. But some people have sex with the same gender, and some people have sex with the opposite gender. That's normal. That's the universal truth of impermanence. And there's no harm here. Now, other people might get angry when they see this same gender relationship. Someone else might get angry, but that's them causing their own anger. They're having craving for permanence. They want everybody to be with someone of the opposite gender. And now when their craving is not getting fulfilled, their anger is arising. And this is coming from their ignorance. So if you're someone who has a same gender relationship, you're not causing any harm to anybody. Or you know somebody who does, you're not causing harm to anybody. People who are getting angry at that, they're causing their own anger. It's not you causing their anger. And I like to point out here that this is how wise this individual was 2,500 years ago. He already understood that same gender relationships don't cause harm, right? There's people today that don't understand that. Right? So 2,500 years ago, he already understood this, and that's why he taught in the way that he did. So you can have confidence that this individual truly was wise, and that's what was able to help him get to this enlightened mental state. Then this transgender individuals, this is completely normal too. If you understand that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different, and that it's impossible for every single mind to come into a body and identify as the same gender. So the physical body might have male sexual organs, but the mind identifies as a female. This is impermanence, right? If every single mind that came into a body identified with the same gender as the sexual organs, that would be permanence. And we don't live in that world. And if you understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different beings in the past, someone could have been female, 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 and now this mind is ending up, this new mind is ending up in a body that has male sexual organs. So now the mind is identifying as a female. Right? And the same thing can happen the other way too. It could be female sexual organs and the mind is identifying as a male, right? This is normal if you understand the universal truth of impermanence and you understand the cycle of rebirth. But again, there's other people in the world that don't understand this. So through the teachings of the Buddha, you can understand transgender individuals are completely normal. So if you're a person who is transgender or you know other people who are, it's completely normal. They're not causing any harm to anybody, right? What they choose to identify as is up to them. It's their choice. Then sometimes people ask me about masturbation, because some people have been taught that, you should never masturbate. It's all terrible. Never do this. You're causing harm. This isn't actually true. There's some situations where masturbation could actually be helpful for you, and there's some situations where it could potentially be harmful. So I'll help you to be able to see this, because remember, there's this gray area that you need to be able to look at. So the ultimate goal as part of this path is you're eliminating your longing, your yearning, your craving for things. Because as long as your mind is craving and longing and yearning, you can only be happy when you get what you want. So masturbation could actually be helpful to reduce your sexual cravings, right? Like if, say, somebody had listened to this discussion here and they heard me share how it's unwise to be having sex with multiple people. And maybe they're like, I have 5 boyfriends or 5 girlfriends, or I have 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends. Maybe I should bring that down to one person, right? So now maybe they need some masturbation to help them. Maybe they pick this one person and they're going to be in a loyal, committed relationship with that person, but their sexual craving is so high, they find that hard to do. So maybe they use some masturbation to help bring their sexual craving down so they can be with just this one person. This is actually really helpful for them. It's beneficial. Or maybe somebody's interested in going out and raping somebody, but instead they use masturbation instead. Right? This could actually be really helpful for that person. They've done something that ensured that they didn't cause harm to others. They're reducing their sensual desire. But also masturbation could be used excessively where it's actually increasing your sensual desire. Like say someone was doing this 10, 20, 30 times a day. That's increasing your sensual desire. Right? So you need to be able to look at what it is that you're choosing to do with masturbation. Are you decreasing your sensual desire or you're increasing it? If you're familiar with a dam, which is a very expensive structure that they build in order to hold water back, what they do is they build these multi-million-dollar projects to be able to hold back water. And now as the water is building up on the dam, because it's rising up from the river flowing, that as the water rises up, in order to protect this multi-million-dollar structure, they will open up the dam in order to release the water so that the water can go back down. And then once the water goes down and the pressure is released, they will then close the dam again. And now it's been protected. So the same thing is going to happen for your mind. As you're choosing to eliminate sexual craving, perhaps, or you're reducing it, you might notice this pressure building up in your mind. And the way to release that in some cases is to use masturbation. So you might decide to use this from time to time to be able to help you. Maybe you go a week or 2 or 3 without having sex, but you feel the pressure built up in your mind and you use some masturbation to release that. But now maybe you go 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks without sex, and now you maybe need some masturbation to help you there. And now maybe you go 3 months, 4 months, 6 months without sex, and now maybe you need some masturbation, right? So this can actually be used in a beneficial way. So you can see that for yourself. Sex with animals is one of the few things that's really black and white, right? There's no way that an animal can give us consent to have sex with it. And I imagine if somebody did this, that there could probably get injured, they could probably get diseases, they could probably get all kinds of things. So this is like really black and white for us. Down here under this, it says pornography, that if you allow your mind to go into pornography, usually what's happening is the mind is looking for intimacy and it turns towards something like pornography to be able to get that. But if you allow your mind to go down into that, what ends up happening is you kind of get stuck in this fantasy world where even if you choose to come out of that and you start having sex with an actual partner again, it doesn't quite feel as fulfilling because your mind has been kind of, indulging in this fantasy world with pornography. And there's usually a certain amount of masturbation that's involved with that as well. So if you are interested in intimacy, I would encourage you to go towards a real life partner rather than going towards pornography, because once your mind gets addicted to that, it's very challenging to be able to come out of it. You can come out of it, but it's just very challenging, and sex oftentimes doesn't feel as fulfilling once you've done that. So this is the third precept. Do you guys have any questions on this at all? Yes, ma'am. We have microphones around somewhere. It's not on yet. There you go.
So, hi David, my name is Mary. I just curious, do you have any suggestion from the Buddhism perspective for the people? I know the sexual desire is naturally right. So if the people, they have the sexual desire, but they don't want to have sex with other people and they don't want to do the masturbation, do you have any suggestion? They can I don't say control, but release and to be come back to the natural feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's meditations to help you eliminate sexual craving. But first, you would like to get the Eightfold Path well underway, which is the core central teaching of the Buddha that I taught yesterday, and it's been recorded many times, so you can learn it from the resources that I share. You'd like to first get the Eightfold Path well underway, get that practiced, and then you can bring in this other meditation to eliminate sexual craving, where it helps you train your mind to not have that longing, yearning. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, not only are you not having sex anymore, but you're not going to be masturbating masturbating either, because you'll be inwardly peaceful, inwardly joyful. Whereas if you're relying on something like masturbation for your pleasure, then you can only be experiencing pleasure when that's occurring, right? And then when you're not having it, that's where the mind's frustrated or agitated or annoyed. So if you'd like to completely get rid of the sexual desire in your mind, first work to develop the Eightfold Path, then bring in this meditation to eliminate sexual craving. And I teach all of this in the books, in the audiobooks, videos, podcasts, classes, courses, retreats. You can learn this kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, like some of my friends, they want to like lose the weight. If the meditation, like you said earlier, they do like helps with the eating desire, because I want to eat, but I also want to lose weight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Meditation is not going to help you lose weight per se.
Like the desire.
But if you have a craving for specific foods, right? And by eating those foods, it's causing you to gain weight. Or maybe you have a certain craving to be over here, and you're complacent and dull and lethargic, and you're not willing to go out and be active. And this is what's contributing to your weight. You can train your mind through the teachings of the Buddha, and by eliminating those cravings, it will help you to lose weight. But it's not going to be like a direct thing that just because you're training your mind, you're absolutely going to lose weight. It just depends if you're gaining weight because of indulging over here. When you get rid of those cravings, it will help you to then lose weight, because you're now making decisions in an improved way.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can I ask the one last question for the last part?
Sure.
Actually, it's for the living purely, if my memory is right. So that shows like a waiting for the needs. I was wondering like how to balance, yes, and how to like understand, like, because people always have their motivation. I always thinking about what I need every day, because I want to like join or maybe participate in this world from my perspective. So how to balance like a waiting for what is given between and what I can control and what I can take part in this world. So it's hard for me, because every day I think I want to choose what I want to do. I choose the food and choose the business I want to do. But things always not goes as you want, right?
Yeah.
So, yes.
So awaiting what is given is that you don't put expectations on other people to do things for you, right? There's no harm in asking, right? Like, but you wouldn't ask for like specific material things, right? So sometimes, like my son, I'm teaching him to be responsible. So I might say, "Hey, son, would you mind washing the dishes? I would like you to wash the dishes," right? So I'm now teaching him to wash the dishes, but I'm not expecting it from him. I'm not requiring him to do it. I don't get angry if he chooses not to do it, right? So you would like to get to the point where you're not putting expectations on other people. So if you have a friend or family member that's traveling, it would be unwise for you to say, "Hey, can you get me this thing or that thing?" Right? Because now you're putting expectations on them. But in terms of you getting the necessities that you need in order to sustain your life, you can do that. You can go get a job, you can make money, you can acquire the resources that you need in order to be able to sustain your life. But that's different than these expectations that you might put on someone to get certain things for you, where you would like to be able to acquire those resources yourself without putting the expectation on others to get them for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So I don't see questions anywhere else. So let's go to number 4. This fourth one is pretty straightforward. Here it is. It says, abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. Okay, so this is exactly what you think it is. The Buddha is teaching you not to lie, to tell the truth, right? Because when you're lying, people are going to discover those lies. It's coming from craving, from anger and ignorance, right? Those 3 poisons, because there's some craving you want. There's something you want. And you think if you tell the truth, you're not going to get it. So the mind lies. And now when you lie, people discover those lies and they find that you're not trustworthy, you're not dependable. So now in a professional environment where your boss can staff you on a project to improve your career, your boss is like, "No, I'm not going to staff that person. I can't rely on them. I can't trust them," right? And your coworkers and your neighbors and people like this. So if you always speak the truth, you never have to worry. right? You just look inward and figure out, hey, what's the truth here? Let me say that. Whereas if you lie, if you've ever done a lot of lying, if you can remember back to when you were a kid, you were doing a lot of lying, you had to keep your lies straight. And that was really hard, right? Because your mind had to figure out, what did I tell mom? What did I tell dad? What did I tell brothers and sisters? Oh my gosh, I got to keep all this straight, right? And how can you get to peace and joy if you're having to keep all this straight? So the Buddha understood this precept so well that you can see this other teaching that I've included here, where he's teaching his son Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his son and his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. The Buddha did leave his family for a period of time, for 6 years, to train his mind, but he came back, and his wife ordains with him, his mother ordains with him, his son, his cousins and brother-in-laws, and so many people from his family were actually learning and actually getting to enlightenment. So here he's teaching his son Rahula, where he's teaching him that you should tell the truth so closely that you don't even tell a joke that has a lie in it. If you can imagine this really wise individual, the Buddha, who would be teaching people these natural laws and telling the truth to be able to teach those natural laws and helping people cultivate wisdom. If he was over here on the side lying, people wouldn't know whether to trust him when he's actually teaching the teachings that lead to enlightenment. So the Buddha understood this so well that he didn't even tell a joke that had a lie. Now, if you're interested in bringing your practice up to this, it's going to be challenging for you, because maybe right now you're telling jokes that have lies in them. Maybe you're even telling degrading and diminishing jokes. Sometimes that's what people do. They degrade other people, or they degrade themselves in order to tell a joke. You don't need to tell jokes this way. This doesn't look good for you. That when you degrade other people, you degrade yourself, or you lie during your jokes, it doesn't actually look wise. Even though people know it's a joke, it's unwise to do that. In order to tell a joke that is truthful, it takes more time and takes more wisdom to be able to tell that type of joke, but those are usually funnier because you've developed them more, and it took you time to be able to get to that point where you actually told that particular joke. So the Buddha understood this precept so well that he wouldn't even tell a joke that had a lie in it. Now, you might not associate a Buddha with someone who tells jokes, but a Buddha is a human being. Right? They're an enlightened being. It just means they've purified their mind, and they just did that by themselves. But they tell jokes, right? You see all these pictures of the Buddha sitting in meditation, like very solemn and serious. That's not the way an enlightened being is all the time, right? They're going to meditate. They're going to have a certain amount of that, but they're going to be out in the world telling jokes and having fun. It's fun to be enlightened, right? It's a real burden. It's horrible to be unenlightened because you're grumpy and irritable and frustrated. But this enlightened being, they're going to tell jokes. They're going to have fun. They're going to have a great time, right? So a Buddha tells jokes. They just do it without telling lies. So if you'd like to bring your practice up to that, it'll really help you in all your relationships, and it'll help your mind as well. So you don't have this obsession where you're constantly trying to figure out what you said to one person versus another. So do you guys have questions on this precept? Yep.
So in case of trying to establish a connection between two things that you said, taking the example in which your grandma makes you a sweater and you don't like it, but in order to try not to harm her feelings, you tell her that you did like it. Is it, and I know the word is not right, but is it acceptable, or as you are lying to her, even though you are not harming anyone, you are not giving her the opportunity to deal with her expectations? How could this situation be understood?
Okay, so you can't harm grandma's feelings. It's not possible. If grandma's having a feeling, it's her own mind that's producing that, right? It's her own craving, desire, attachment that's producing that. So if grandma is angry or frustrated or upset, she's causing that herself. And if she gave you the sweater and you were like, and she was like, hey, do you like the sweater, right? What I would say in that situation, I was like, grandma, I really appreciate you gave me this to me. This is really kind of you. Thank you so much. Right? I wouldn't necessarily say yes or no. I'd say, I just really appreciate that you've given me this gift. This is really wonderful, right? Telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know, That's not what it means, right? Because this is an example that people usually give me. They say, what about if World War II, there was a Nazi chasing somebody into your home, and this person ran and went and hid underneath your bed. And now the Nazi soldiers showed up and they're like, hey, where's Barbara? Am I supposed to say, oh, she's under my bed right there? No, that's unwise, right? Telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know. If that happened to me, what I would be like, oh, are you looking for Barbara? Maybe we should look over there. Let's go look over by the bush, right? I would kind of redirect them to another direction. I don't have to tell them what's going on and that Barbara's under my bed. So there's no such thing as a white lie or a lie that is unharmful because it's causing harm. So you would like to get to the point where you're able to navigate the world, and telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know. And that's what you can share as you are talking to people, is you can just share the things that you know to be true, but it doesn't mean you need to tell everything that you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? No questions? Okay. All right. So let's go to the 5th precept. Here, this one is refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So remember, the first thing you'd like to do here is if there's any words that you don't know, you're going to need to research those. You're going to need to investigate them and examine them, because part of the wisdom that you need to cultivate on the path to enlightenment is the wisdom of language and how language and vocabulary is being used. When I ran across this, I kind of suspected what this word meant, heedlessness, but I didn't know 100%. So I was interested to go look at it, right? So if you run across any of that kind of stuff when you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, research it and investigate it. So that's what I did here. What this word heedlessness means is careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful. Right? This is what's helping you to be able to understand what this precept is. That if you put any substances in the body that is producing any of this stuff, that means you're walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment, because the Buddha is teaching you to have mindfulness or awareness of mind. And if you put substances into the body that's producing heedlessness or unmindfulness, you're not going to be aware of your thoughts and ideas, your unwholesome qualities and your wholesome qualities. You're not going to be able to eliminate the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome. So this particular precept is very important. And the Buddha puts it here as last for a reason. Because if you don't practice this one, you're more likely to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and lie, right? If you talk to people who are in jail, who are in prison, and you're like, hey, what are you doing here? Why are you here? They might say, oh, I robbed a bank, or I killed somebody, or something like that. But if you're like, no, like really, like, why are you here? They might say, if it wasn't for those substances, I would have never robbed that bank. But I was feeding a drug habit, and that's the reason why I'm here, is because of the drugs. Or I wouldn't have killed that person if I wasn't high on drugs, right? So this particular precept is vitally important, just as the other ones are, because if you don't practice this one, you're more likely to do all the others, and now you're generating all this unwholesome karma. But let's talk about this, because there's gray areas here, right? Like this one of marijuana. There's irrefutable evidence that there's a medical benefit to this plant, but it can also be used as a high as well. It just depends on how you're using it. There's some children who have like 20 seizures a day. They give them a little CBD oil on the tongue, and they don't have another seizure for 6 months. Right? This is from the marijuana plant, the CBD oil, right? But then it can also be used for a high as well. So if someone's using it for medical purposes, they will usually look for a high CBD. That's the medical properties of the plant. But if they're looking for a high, they will usually look for a high THC. And then if someone's using it for medical purposes, they will usually ingest it as an oil or an edible, where if somebody's using it for a high, they will typically smoke it. But you can actually eat it as an edible and actually get high from that as well. So you're going to need to know for yourself what situations are you using this for. And if you're using this for stress or anxiety or something like that, or helping you to fall asleep, it's not going to actually solve that, because those things are being caused by craving, desire, attachment. So if you're using marijuana to eliminate stress and anxiety, it's not going to eliminate your stress and anxiety, because the cause of that is the craving, desire, attachment. So So you need to be able to make sure you have a real valid medical purpose for this plant, but it does have medical properties. We know that cigarettes don't have any medical properties, and more people have learned about this. This is why we're seeing less and less people smoking. But when people were smoking a lot, we were seeing a lot of lung cancer, mouth cancer, tongue cancers, things like this. You're going to need to pay attention to your prescription medications because some of these can actually be harmful. Of course, medication is used for a beneficial purpose, right? That's one of the benefits we have now, that we can really help with certain medical situations that we have. But some of these medicines can actually be addictive. So whenever a doctor prescribes you a medicine, I recommend that you research that. We live in the information age. You have information at your fingertips where you can actually research this medication. And what you might find out is that this particular medicine is addictive. And if that's the case, that's very helpful and insightful for you, because now right there in your doctor's office, you can ask your doctor, hey, do you have another medication? This looks like it's something that's addictive. And they might be able to prescribe you something different, right? But in some situations, they may not have any other options. That might be the only one. But it's still insightful for you because now you know that this medicine that you're about to start taking is addictive, and you can try to get off of it as soon as possible, not allowing your mind to get addicted to it. So I recommend that before you put anything in the body, that you research it to be able to understand it. You need to even take a look at your caffeine intake, because caffeine takes the mind up into this excited state, and then you have this energy, but then it's going to drop off, right? By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have sustainable energy all day long. Whereas if you rely on something like caffeine to lift your mind up, it's then going to drop back off, and you're never giving your mind the ability to build the sustainable energy all day long. So I recommend that you look at your caffeine intake, and you might decide to slowly start to diminish that so that you can build this natural energy and you can have sustainable energy all day long. But of course, your sensual desire is going to kick in because of that flavor of the coffee or the tea or the soda or whatever it is. You're going to need to overcome that so that now you can choose to let this go. Then there's sugar too, right? Sugar actually taken in excess can actually cause a high. But we tend to learn that as a child, and we tend to kind of start stepping away from that. But that's something that you would like to just look at and make sure you're not taking sugar in excess. And if you have children that you're responsible for, you might take a look at that too and help them. What this says down here at the bottom is it says psychedelic substances. Psychedelic substances are sometimes taught by people that it's actually helping you to get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. This is part of the unknowing of true reality. Psychedelic substances do promote this introspection where you kind of look inward and you can see things about the mind that you otherwise weren't aware of. But you need to cultivate that so that you have it at all times. You need to be able to be reflective and introspective at all times during your day in order to be able to get to enlightenment. If you rely on a substance like psychedelics, you're not cultivating that introspection. So that means you're not going to have that introspection all throughout your day. You're not going to be able to be on the phone to your mom having a difficult conversation and be like, hey, Mom, I'm sorry. I need to go drop some LSD. I need to take these magic mushrooms. I need to really think about what you just said. Like, can you hold on for a little bit? Right? Like, you can't do that. You're going to need to have that conversation with your boss or your parents or your life partner. You're not going to be able to rely on a psychedelic substance. So you'd like to get to the point where you've developed this introspection. And that's what the path to enlightenment is going to do for you. It's going to help you to be more reflective, right? So if you hear somebody say that psychedelic substances are helping you to get to enlightenment, this is untrue. It's actually hindering you because it's not allowing your mind to cultivate that introspection naturally so that you can have it at all times during your day. So any questions on this fifth precept? By the way, I don't have an exhaustive list here, right? There's plenty of substances that we could put here. The Buddha didn't have an exhaustive list either. That's why he has this word heedlessness. He taught in a way that is timeless. He could have never imagined we would have created LSD and PCB, right? Because there's chemicals. They didn't exist during his lifetime, right? So he taught in a way that was timeless because he understood impermanence, that things were going to change over time. So he needed to use language that was timeless. So any substance, nowadays there's synthetic marijuana, there's synthetic drugs and things like this that we're creating. That all fits into this same category of heedlessness. So this isn't an exhaustive list. These are just things that I use to talk about in order to help you guys be able to see this precept and then apply it to your day-to-day life. Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions anywhere. Oh, there's something coming in on YouTube. My eyes are a little bit challenged here, so I need to expand this. Let's see. On the fourth precept, I want to ask, is it lie by not telling? How about not telling someone things that he didn't know? Let's see. I'm having difficulties reading here. To answer a lie. Okay, so what the Buddha teaches you is that if you're in a court of law, that you should tell everything that you know. Because if you don't tell everything that you know, there's consequences for that, right? Because you're under oath and now you're testifying. And if you left something out, you could actually experience harmful results. But in your day-to-day life, which is 99.99999% of the time, not telling everything you know it isn't a lie, right? Because you haven't lied about anything. You've just shared what you know. Like, for example, here's an example that people ask me about. They say, what if my wife comes out? We're going on a evening out for dinner, and my wife comes out and says, hey, honey, how do I look? Do you like this new dress that I bought? Well, if you were like, that looks horrible. Are you really going out with that? Are you serious? Like, there's going to be unwholesome kamma there, right? But if you look at the dress and you don't like it, right? That's coming from your own cravings. That's your own desire. That's your own wants and expectations. Obviously, your wife likes that dress or else she wouldn't have bought it, right? So all she's looking for here is she's looking for confidence. That's all she's looking for. So when she comes out and she's got that dress and she's like, hey, honey, what do you think about this dress? I'll say, she says, do you like this dress? I'll say, we're going out for dinner. I enjoy spending time with you. It doesn't matter to me what you're wearing. Let's just go have fun, right? You don't need to comment about the dress. Just give her something that's confident and then just go, right? You don't need to talk about the dress. So you can say these kinds of things and you are telling the truth, right? You don't need to talk about your own thoughts or ideas about this dress because that's just going to be diminishing and degrading her. And now with that, you're going to experience unwholesome results, right? So telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything unless you're like in a court of law or something like that. If you're sworn under oath to tell everything that you know, then you're going to need to be able to tell everything you know because there's consequences in not doing so. Okay. All right. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. I'm just going to end our class here for this morning. It's just about 12:30. It's about 12:17. We usually take a break up until 2. So you guys will get a little extra time because yesterday we shaved a little bit of time off. So today we're going to take a break up to 2 p.m. So you'll get about a little bit over an hour and a half, about an hour and 40 minutes lunch break. And when we come back, I'm going to teach you walking meditation. This is really good if you have an overactive mind, if you have a lot of energy and it's really hard for you to calm down. But it's also good if you notice you're falling asleep in meditation or you're having aches and pains in the body. The walking meditation will help you. It'll take me all of about 10 or 15 minutes to teach it to you. And then we're going to do a session where you can do some meditation of walking meditation. And then we'll have a discussion afterwards and see what questions you guys have. So thank you for your questions as part of our class. Thank you for your interest to learn. If you'd like to learn more, just come back at 2:00 or you're welcome to hang out here too. It's really up to you. Be well and enjoy the rest of your day if I don't see you. And if I see you at 2, it'll be great. And I'll share some more with you. Okay. Take care. Sawadee Kap.